DFS. It is Friday, November 11th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 10 DraftKings podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, Jared Smola. Jared, normally we're doing this in the middle of Friday. I had some other stuff for work today come up earlier in the day, so we're pushing back. Kids off of school. It's been definitely a little bit different Friday for me, but I feel ready to run through the slate we've got. It's an interesting slate, I think.
It is kind of ugly, but I think sometimes the ugly ones are where you have more of an edge and you kind of have to play those guys that might not be so comfortable.
I think that's what's interesting about it is a lot of times, we'll go into the lineup generator. At least that's my first step in getting ready for the show. And I look at the values and I'm like, okay, that guy's obvious. Let's see who else I should mention. This time it's like, oh, it's not a whole lot of obvious. And the other thing is the obvious, there's always obvious guys, but if you try to stack up the obvious guys, then the salary disappears pretty quickly in this one. So there are going to be some ways to deal with that I think we're going to talk about as we go through every position.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get into it. I think it's a good running back slate, but it's tough at wide receiver, and it's tough to get different as far as your stacks go. But let's get into it.
As always, we start at cash quarterback, and I wonder, Jared, this is normally the part where you're like, I'm probably going to play Josh Allen, or I'm not playing Josh Allen this week. Now the Bills are like, we might play Josh Allen, but we might not play Josh Allen this week. So is it Patrick Mahomes for you in cash, or are you going down into the slums?
I'm not going slumming. I'm going in the middle with Justin Fields. I do think Mahomes is valuable. I'll talk about Fields, and if you want to go cheap, I do think Trevor Lawrence is okay. Just for the $5,400 price tag, I just think he's going to throw it 40 plus times. He does have some rushing ability, so I think Lawrence is worth messing around with. The way I'm building my cash lineup though now, Fields is the one that fits at $6,500, up $1,200 from last week, which tells you how big of a value he was last week. I don't think he's overvalued here. I think this is kind of where he should be priced at this point, especially for this matchup. 24.4, 26, and then obviously 46 DraftKings points last week. We're looking for the 24 to 26 points of that at this price tag. That'd be plenty. We're getting the rushing, obviously 12.3 carries per game over the last three for Justin Fields, 8 designed runs per game. So to me, that makes the rushing production even more bankable when they're designing stuff. To get Fields the ball on the ground. And then the matchup against Detroit, 26th in both Football Outsiders run and pass defense DVOA. The Bears have the third highest implied total on the main slate at 25.75 points. So, the bookmakers, at least in this matchup, are buying into this Bears offense.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be part of the Justin Fields breakout right now. It's an enjoyable time. And you mentioned the salary's up, but he's still $1,400 cheaper than Patrick Mahomes. It's a lot closer than that on FanDuel, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, Justin Fields is squarely in play here. You certainly can play him naked. Are you going to play him that way or play him with Darnell Mooney? Cash first, but then we can talk about his tournament viability.
Yeah, cash, it's definitely just Fields. Neither of those other guys, and no one else on the Bears pops as a strong value. And if you do play him in tournaments, I think he's definitely viable, by himself. Mooney's the guy I'd play him with if I'm looking to stack up Fields in a tournament.
Yeah, I think the ownership rate gives you a little bit of pause, the projection, if you look in the lineup generator on Justin Fields, just because, he's running hot right now. But if he doesn't score a rushing touchdown, it could be a lot different game. That said, I think that the upside on this particular QB slate with Josh Allen looking very iffy, with Jalen Hurts not on the slate, I think it makes sense to ignore the ownership projection on him and chase the upside that's there.
Yeah, he's definitely viable in tournaments. I think I'm going to go for the Fields fade though in tournaments. Talk about the guys I'm playing instead, but the argument against Fields is the ownership. There's really no other argument against them.
Right. On the cash side, I'm going to roll with Trevor Lawrence at 5,400. I certainly know that he's a risk going in. He's definitely not a clear hit at any salary, but that salary is still low because of him not being hit. We know that he can outperform it. And this Chiefs matchup is good. The Chiefs are the 7th most friendly defense to QB scoring by our adjusted fantasy points allowed on the season. They have faced the 2nd most pass attempts in the league. They have allowed the 2nd most touchdown passes. They have grabbed the 6th fewest interceptions. So greater chance that Trevor Lawrence is throwing more, greater chance that he's not throwing picks, although he has a way of making bad defenses good in that area. Their mid-pack and sack rate. Trevor Lawrence is coming off his best Pro Football Focus passing grade of the season. That also followed 2 of his 3 worst passing grades. So he's not necessarily on a hot streak right now, but there's at least good in the most recent exposure to him. So we know that that's there. So again, salary plus situation. I like Trevor Lawrence to start out my cash lineup.
Yeah, I'm hoping last week is the start of a hot streak for Lawrence. I love this Chiefs Jaguars game for tournaments. I'm going to be playing both sides of it, Mahomes and Lawrence with run backs from the other side. A lot of these guys are just good values. If you look at our lineup generator, Christian Kirk is a good value. Juju Smith-Schuster is a good value. Travis Kelce's a guy I'm always just trying to get into tournament lineups because I think if he does go for 28, it's such a big advantage over the rest of the tight end group if you can get one of those games out of him. This is also the fastest paced game of the week. Kansas City 6th in situation neutral pace, and the Jacksonville Jags are 10th in neutral pace. So, and it has the highest over under on the week too, 51 points. So I like, again, both sides of this game for tournaments.
Yeah, you could try to get it a little different by playing Trevor Lawrence with Kelce, maybe Kelce and Juju, and you try to absorb all of the Mahomes passing upside, but still get different at quarterback. We can talk about some of the Jaguars. You mentioned some of the names, but outside of that game, I think at tournament QB, a couple guys that I'm considering at least. Jacoby Brissett at 5,400 is interesting. I'm not sure how often I would go to him, but somebody to stick in a couple of spots. The Dolphins are tied for the 3rd most friendly QB scoring matchup on the season. We've got Amari Cooper coming in at sub 10% ownership, despite a strong production profile to this point. The matchup's just been good for passing and for shootout situations, high scoring potential games there. So I like Jacoby Brissett as, a very sneaky few lineup guy. I think Dak Prescott more so is going underplayed. He's projected to go underplayed, at least 3% projected ownership. And I know we've talked about this might be a slow paced game. This might be a game where Dallas leans on the run, but especially if Ezekiel Elliott doesn't end up playing or if he's limited, I could see Dallas leaning more toward the pass. I don't think there's any trepidation on their part about leaning toward Dak Prescott. We've got CeeDee Lamb in single digit ownership projection. We've got Dalton Schultz in single digits at 3,800 in salary on here. He's got 5+ catches in 2 straight games. So I think that there's some real sneaky upside to the Dallas pass offense.
Yeah, tournament's a place to take a shot on, what if Dallas decides to go pass heavy for some reason, or what if they go run heavy and Dak just gets, all 4 of their touchdowns for whatever reason. So I like that call. The Cowboys have the 4th highest implied total on the main slate. The ownership is nice there. I like the Brissett call. That's the Browns Fins is another game where you can stack up both sides of it. I think I'm going to play, at least one Tua lineup. We're almost at the point where I think you just play a Tua lineup every week, just the upside he and that offense have shown. Tyreek Hill's expensive, Jalen Waddle's more affordable, but you can definitely go for the double stack there. And then, like you said, I think Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think, are pretty good values on the other side of that game. So it's another game where the stacks kind of come together pretty easy in that one.
Might even be a tight end to talk about from that game as we get down to that position. But for now, we'll take a different avenue and go to running back, where to me, Jared, it looks like Saquon Barkley over Derrick Henry this week. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm leaning that direction, especially on DraftKings with the full PPR. You're paying $300 extra for Barkley. Henry's matchup's good. Barkley's matchup is the best matchup for running backs right now. Houston's basically dead last in any metric against the run. We've seen Josh Jacobs have a huge game against them. Miles Sanders had a decent game against them last week. So, Saquon Barkley seems about as safe as you can get at running back.
Yeah, Houston is not only the friendliest running back defense by our adjusted fantasy points allowed, they're adding 37% scoring to opposing running backs. That's 11 percentage points ahead of the next most friendly. That's a lot larger than the gap between number 2 and the several defenses behind it. So it's a tremendous matchup. Texans opponents are also running at the highest rate versus expected. So they're encouraging opponents to run the ball. And Denver, for that Derrick Henry matchup, has been a negative matchup for running back scoring. It's not a spot where I'm worried about Derrick Henry at all, but if we're, comparing at the top and trying to pick one of the 2 expensive guys, it's Saquon Barkley for me.
It seems like Denver's a negative scoring matchup for running backs because their pass defense is so good, just kind of limits offense's production in general. Because as we talked about in yesterday's show, their run defense actually hasn't been good. So, if Tennessee can lean on Henry, get him his, 20, 25 carries, I do think he'll have a nice game. It's tough though to fit Henry and Barkley in a cash lineup. I mean, you'd have to play Trevor Lawrence to make that happen. I like Alvin Kamara. You're saving about $1,000 off Barkley and Derrick Henry. It didn't result in big fantasy production last time out because the Saints just laid a total egg in that game against Baltimore, but Kamara's role got even better with Mark Ingram out. He played 88% of the Saints' offensive snaps, ran her out on 75% of the pass plays. That's like elite territory as far as participation goes. So if the Saints don't lay a total egg again, I think Kamara's gonna bounce back with the big game against the Steelers, who are actually dead last in Football Outsiders run defense DVOA over the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, and Monday was the first time since week 1 where he didn't do terrifically in terms of opportunities. So I don't think we have to worry about that being a trend. It was just a 1-game thing. I also like Dameon Pierce on the other side of the Saquon Barkley game, 6,300. So we get some salary help there. The Giants are 6-2, but they're outscoring opponents by 0.8 points per game. So they're playing close games. They're not likely to push Houston out of running the ball, especially if they're going Barkley heavy on their side. Pierce has had 20 plus opportunities in every game since week 3, 3+ catches in 4 straight games before Thursday night against the Eagles. So you might look at that and say, oh, they weren't throwing him the ball in that game where they lost by double digits. That game was closer than that for a lot of it. Plus he was just getting whatever he wanted on the ground. He carried 27 times in that one. And frankly, if he gets a 27 carries in this one and 0 targets, I'll be okay with it even on DraftKings, as it probably means that he's going over 100 yards.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call Pierce game script proof, but like he's not someone like a Nick Chubb where we need to worry about him getting phased out if they do fall behind. He's going to contribute in the passing game. So yeah, Pierce is the third guy I'll be using in cash this week.
And we got to use him up now before he hits that rookie wall.
Yeah, that's right.
On the GPP side, this is where I like Alvin Kamara a little bit better because I'm leaning toward the other guys over there. But I mean, if I'm playing around with it and he fits with Barkley and Pierce, then I'm certainly using him as well. $900 cheaper than Derrick Henry, $1,200 cheaper than Saquon Barkley, even $200 cheaper than Josh Jacobs. So I like him for that and all the other reasons you mentioned. I think Dalvin Cook might come in under-owned here at $8,000. So he's not going to be a sneaky value, but 4% projected ownership. The Bills have been a tough defense for the season overall. Over the past 2 weeks, though, they're only 22nd in run defense DVOA. They've got a bunch of injuries that they're dealing with. And perhaps as important, maybe more important, if the Bills don't have Josh Allen, then there's not quite that scoring pressure that can push an offense out of running the ball.
Yeah, I like the Cook call. He's tough to click on DraftKings at that price, that close to Henry and Barkley. That much more than Kamara, Travis Etienne. He's priced lower on FanDuel. I'll talk about him on that show. I think he's a better play there, and he's still going to be low owned on FanDuel. But I definitely like the call. As usual in tournaments, I'm not going to get too crazy at running back. I'm going to play the guys who I think are the best plays. We've talked about them all. I think Etienne is a great play. This could be a game where Etienne does damage in the passing game, which we really haven't seen lately. It's been the big rushing production, but it's again the game the Jags probably play from behind. The Chiefs have allowed the most running back catches and the third most running back receiving yards. Football Outsiders has them 26th in running back coverage. So again, it could be a big receiving day for Etienne. The one guy I might go a little bit off the board with at running back is David Montgomery. He's $6,000 coming in at 7% projected ownership. As we talked about on yesterday's preview show, he's still been the clear lead guy in this backfield as far as snaps go. Montgomery's played 70+% of Chicago's offensive snaps in 4 of the past 5 games. He's averaging 14.2 carries and 2.0 targets per game over that span. Probably need a bit more than that for him to deliver as a tournament play, but I definitely think that's possible with the Bears favorites here against the Lions. Lions, obviously a good matchup for Montgomery on the ground. Plus Montgomery gives you some leverage on the Justin Fields teams, right? Like if the rushing touchdowns go to Montgomery instead of Fields, you're kind of, you're double scoring there.
Yeah, and that's the worry is Justin Fields is doing the scoring on the ground, but he's not going to score all of the touchdowns on the ground. And if this team scores 4 times or even 3 times in this game, there's room for both of those guys to find the end zone. Yep. Tony Pollard, I think, is one other guy to bring up. We're waiting to see if Zeke's going to play. They said he's questionable officially. They said it's key what he's doing in Saturday's practice. To me, it really looks like they're going to at least limit Zeke, because I know I forget if it was a coach or if it was Jerry Jones saying that they don't want him to get to the point. I think it was Mike McCarthy. They don't want Zeke to get to the point where he was with his knee last year, where he was playing through this knee injury that was clearly inhibiting him. So it might be even better for Pollard in tournament now purposes if Zeke does play, because then we're not going to get the double-digit ownership, but that I'm sure will if Zeke is inactive for this game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It was Zeke on Wednesday, right? Said, he's kind of looking towards the long game. I think he said. Jerry Jones has been the one like, yeah, Zeke's going to play. Zeke's going to play. Hopefully Jerry doesn't push him out there when he shouldn't be out there. But yeah, good matchup for the Cowboys running game. Packers run D was bad to begin with. They're missing Rashawn Gary and Devondre Campbell for this game, so definitely a good spot for whoever's getting the carries.
Mm-hmm. On to wide receiver. If we're saving salary to pay up at other spots, especially running back, Jared, wide receiver looks like the place for me to do it this week. And, like along with just what's there and the matchups for the wideouts, all the QB injury questions that we have are dinging some of the other, maybe not quite top shelf, but second shelf guys, and just making it easier to look at mid to even low end wide receivers who are getting enough opportunity to get into the lineup and pair with those high dollar running backs. Is that who you're starting with in cash? You looking for those cheaper guys, or do you have an expensive guy to start with?
No, all my cash game wide receivers are under 6K. I'm just looking for, target safety, relative safety at cheaper price tag. So Christian Kirk for me, kind of hit a 2-game lull in weeks, what was it, 5 and 6, but the last 3 weeks, 10, 7, and 9 targets, a 24.5% target share over that span. Again, we expect more passing than usual out of the Jags as they, probably play catch up against the Chiefs. So I like Christian Kirk. I like Rondale Moore, $5,200. I mean, we have 4 games of Rondale Moore this season as Arizona's primary slot receiver. He's gone 8 targets, 10 targets, 8 targets, 10 targets in those 4 games. I mean, give me 8 targets at this price, I'm happy. Moore missed the first game against the Rams, but Greg Dortch, who was, playing the Rondale Moore role in that game at that point, 9 catches for 80 yards on 10 targets. So if I can get that out of Rondale Moore, I'm very happy.
Yeah, and he's somebody that I would still use even if it's Colt McCoy over Kyler Murray, because if Colt McCoy's in there, that guy in the slot on those shorter routes is going to be a nice thing to find with Aaron Donald bearing down.
For sure.
Other guys that I like in that range, George Pickens, $5,000 against the Saints, who will be without Marshawn Lattimore again at corner. Pickens had 6+ catches in 3 of the 4 games before the Philly matchup where he got blanked. Now Chase Claypool's gone. This is the first game since that trade, so his target outlook should only be better for this one. Zay Jones, I think, is in play, 4,400 in that matchup with the Chiefs. He's tied with Amari Cooper for 24th among wideouts in receptions per game, so he's been a decent enough bet for catches at the price that he comes at. And Donovan Peoples-Jones, not as safe a target bet, but at 4,300, he does have 4+ catches in 5 straight games. And I mentioned this is a game where I think we're going to get something along the lines of a shootout, maybe the Dolphins jumping ahead. Dolphins opponents are passing at the 4th highest rate over expected for the season. So I think there's a good chance that DPJ gets extra targets. Even if he doesn't, he has been efficient, and I think he's solid at that 4,300. Maybe comfier for a tourney lineup, but I think enough to get into a cash lineup if I'm looking for that salary savings.
Yeah, DPJ is who I have as my 3rd wideout in cash right now. I think Zay Jones is viable. I don't want to play Zay Jones and Christian Kirk. So I'm gonna go with DPJ. Like you said, 4+ catches in 5 straight, 6.2 targets per game over that span. He has 11.6+ DK points in 4 of his last 5. Like that's kind of all we need at this price tag. So you got to save money somewhere, and I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is a good place to do it.
Mm-hmm. I'm leaning toward the same group of guys that we talked about for the tourney side to save that money and try to get those higher dollar running backs into my lineup so I can mine them for upside, especially because, a lot of times if you're paying down, you're like, I hope this guy gets to 5 catches, but George Pickens, Rondale Moore, we've seen the volume upside. George Pickens has the big play upside. So DPJ has the downfield upside. So we're not talking about guys with low ceilings that we hope just get to the certain mark. We're talking about guys that have high ceilings that can make the difference for us.
Yeah, for sure. And again, as I mentioned before, I think Juju Smith-Schuster is worth considering in tournaments. McCole Hardman is out on Sunday. He'd been playing a bigger role, so that leaves behind some targets for maybe Juju picks up an extra
Darius Toney season.
Oh man, what is he priced at? I haven't even looked yet.
I definitely
did not. 5K. He's 5K.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I won't be able to get to him at 5K.
No, you shouldn't.
I like Amon-Ra St. Brown for tournaments. He hasn't had a big game since week 2 now. It feels like forever ago. He had all the injury stuff. he's come back the last 2 weeks. Again, he hasn't had big games, but he's seen 27 and then 35% of Detroit's targets. And he's still seeing massive target shares. And then he has this matchup against Bears slot corner Kyler Gordon, who is allowing the most yards per coverage snap this season. So I think St. Brown is, due for a big game if he keeps getting that type of target share.
Yeah, all 5 games where he has topped 32% snap share, he has seen at least 9 targets. So if we believe in that matchup, if we believe that the Bears have the scoring upside this week, it's an easy play. It's one of those where you're like, even if he doesn't have this huge game, he's not going to be the one that kills me. He's going to be the guy sitting there with, 12 to 14 PPR points. That's enough to get me where I need to go. And the fact that he hasn't had the big games is keeping that salary down. In a similar range, I think Amari Cooper, who I mentioned with Jacoby Brissett, 6,500 is in play. Even if you don't want to play Brissett, there's plenty of upside to him in that matchup with Miami. Jerry Jeudy at 5,700 against Tennessee is interesting. Chris Olave, 6,800 against the Steelers, has that high ceiling if they hit some deep stuff with him. Jerry Jeudy, I want to just mention for Denver that I'm a little bit more interested. I would normally be completely off on Denver, but Tennessee's missing several defensive starters, most notably Jeffrey Simmons up front, who's key to not only their run defense, but their pass rush. So that could make it a very different matchup for the Denver offense.
Yeah, it didn't make my sheet because it'd be like a Millie Maker play for me, but I do think a Russell Wilson double stack with Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. They're all pretty cheap. I mean, Sutton and Jeudy are both under 6K. Russell Wilson's 5,900. I know it's a but it's going to be so low owned. And it is a spot where maybe Denver's passing game gets going. I don't know. Millie Maker.
I just threw up a little.
Going back to the Chiefs real quick, though, I was just looking through these prices. Sky Morris. Minimum price $3K. Like, again, if you're in a bigger tournament, it might be worth a look. MVS is 4,100. We know he's going to be a full-time player. The targets haven't been there lately, but again, with Hardman out, those looks got to go somewhere. So it might be worth a look.
Yes, MVS is the one that I would go to as hey, why not? Let's see what happens. It's only been 8 targets over the past 3 games, but like you said, he's still been on the field. He was 71% snap share last time out. So Patrick Mahomes has told us it's going to be different guys at different times, so we shouldn't be shocked if there is one more MVS week at some point. Tight end for cash, Jared. Who you like?
Greg Dulcich, yes. $3,400, another spot we can save money. There's other viable, cheaper tight ends this week. Foster Moreau is $3,200, but I definitely prefer Dulcich. 5.7 targets on a 16% target share over his first 3 NFL games. He has 11 plus DraftKings points in all those games. Coming off the bye now, maybe he's even more comfortable in the offense. And Tennessee is good against most positions, but they're 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends. So it's definitely a spot where Denver might look to feature Dulcich in the passing game.
Yeah, it hasn't been a monster target share so far. It's been good enough, certainly, for tight end. It hasn't been a monster, but just the way that they threw him immediately into the lineup, his playing time has immediately been high. They're throwing him stuff downfield. It tells me that they like him. They think he's important to their offense. At 3,400, I love it. The second longest average depth of target among starting tight ends in the league so far. He's over 15 yards per catch. And the Titans defense leading the league in pushing offenses to throw. So they're the opponents of Tennessee are tops in the league in pass rate over expected. So we'll see if that changes with Jeffrey Simmons not around, but it's not going to hurt things for the Denver pass catchers.
Russell Wilson triple stack.
Oh God, no. I don't think that the ceiling's there on him, but I'll take his pieces. That's why if you want to bet on Russell Wilson this week, just play some Jerry Jeudy or Greg Dulcich.
By the way, Mike Kliss told us, was it back in August, that Dulcich was the guy Denver wanted to feature. It was not Alberto. So if you listen to that podcast, hopefully you maybe got some Dulcich in best ball leagues and then were able to pick him up a few weeks ago.
Yeah, you mentioned the other viable guys. I think this GPP side is where I would consider the other 3K tight ends because Dulcich is carrying the highest ownership projection at tight end right now in the lineup generator on Draft Sharks. Foster Moreau, 3,200 against the Colts. Evan Engram, 3,300 against the Chiefs. Feel better about him since there's no injury designation for that game. Dalton Schultz, I already mentioned, but I think you can play him even without Dak Prescott. And then the one I teased is Harrison Bryant at $2,700 against the Dolphins. 0 targets the last time out, but 74% playing time. So he was out there, just a 42% route rate. So we'd like to see that change. Obviously, it's not somebody who I'm saying is definitely going to be heavily involved, but if we do get a shootout, We might get more Harrison Bryant on the field. He has been more of a receiver than a blocker all along. $2,700. If he gets to 5 targets and does anything, it's a win.
He's on my sheet here. I'm actually surprised you mentioned him because, I was kind of excited about him 2 weeks ago with Njoku out because I do think Bryant's a good pass catching tight end. Super disappointing role and usage for him in that game, but it's one game. Like the Browns could come up with a different game plan here, and they probably should because Miami's been bad against tight ends all season. So Bryant probably should be, more involved in the passing game in this one. So I definitely think I probably wouldn't use him as like a one-off, but again, in your Browns Dolphins stacks, I think he's a good guy to chuck in there.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else you got for GPP tight end?
Yeah, I like Ingram. Full practice on Friday off the injury report. So the back thing that limited him in the second half last week should not be a problem. Again, I like this game in general. The Chiefs have not been good against tight ends. Then again, on the other side of the game, Travis Kelce, the Jags are dead last in Football Outsiders tight end coverage rankings. So, you don't have to make an argument for Kelce, but I do think getting up to him, because it's not comfortable to get up to him. Like it makes the rest of your lineup tough, but I think, that's what keeps his ownership relatively in check in tournaments.
Yeah, like I said, Greg Dulcich is ahead of him in ownership projection right now. So if that winds up being true, then that adds to Kelce. And I mean, he's the one guy where if he scored 3 touchdowns Sunday, you'd be like, right. Oh yeah, that's not shocking. Nobody's going to bet on it, but it wouldn't be shocking.
Exactly.
Defense. It's pretty simple for me this week, Jared. It's tough for me to get away from the 2 Vikings for $2,200 against Case Keenum. If it's Case Keenum, if it's Josh Allen, not so much the Vikings. Cardinals 2,700 versus John Walford, because I'm not assuming that Matthew Stafford's going to be in there, and that I don't think I'm going away from those 2 because of the price and because of the upside.
Yep, I'm with you there. Tournaments and cash, I'll be starting with the Vikings in cash. Hopefully, I can stay with them if it is Case Keenum. If not, I'll have to get my way up to Arizona. For tournaments, I like Pittsburgh at 2,800. It's Andy Dalton. They're getting TJ Watt back, right? Is that confirmed, or we think he's going to be back?
Last I saw, he said he's going to play. I haven't seen anybody say anything otherwise.
So I mean, that alone, kind of gives the Steelers defense upside again, getting TJ Watt back. And then Tennessee, I've talked up Russell Wilson here, but I do think the Titans defense, it's still a talented unit even with the injuries. Denver still has the lowest implied total on the main slate, lower than the Colts, lower than the Texans. So Vegas still respects this Titans defense, and Russell Wilson throughout his career has been a high sack rate guy, so there's upside here.
The week 1 game that TJ Watt was a part of is literally the only game this season that Pittsburgh has had a good pass defense DVOA performance. If you look at the game by game on Football Outsiders, that game is like minus 36%. And then beyond that, it's strongly positive. And that's how they measure it. Negative is good for defense. Yep. Positive is bad for defense. It's amazing. That's been the difference. There have been other guys that missed time here and there along the way, but that's the only thing that changed week 1 versus everything else.
Saints are also going to be missing their center and one of their guards on Sunday. So yeah, that helps the matchup for Pittsburgh.
That is a dinged up team this season. That's going to do it for the Week 10 DraftKings podcast. You can head over to draftsharks.com now, play around with our lineup generator, build your own lineups for playing on DraftKings, on FanDuel, on Yahoo. You can also find Jared's articles highlighting top picks for both cash and tournament entries on DraftKings this week. If you're watching us on the stream, stick around. We'll take like 5 seconds and then we'll switch over to FanDuel. For Jared Small and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us. It is Friday, November 11th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 10 FanDuel podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff. With me, as always, Jared Small. And of course, this is the podcast where I would urge you not to play on FanDuel because they suck. But we'll tell you who to play if you are playing on there. Jared, who do you like for cash at quarterback?
Yeah, it's Patrick Mahomes for me on FanDuel here. He's priced closer to the rest of the guys. The
$200 more than Justin Fields this week.
I know. Can you believe it? If you had said that 3 weeks ago, it'd be like crazy.
I couldn't believe it today when I saw it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it makes Fields a better tournament play on this side. He's not going to be nearly as high owned as he's going to be on DraftKings. But Mahomes in cash for me, the Chiefs have a 30.25 point implied total. That's almost 4 points higher than any other team on the main slate. And Jacksonville, a month ago, we considered them a tough defense. They have not been tough lately. They actually 30th in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA over the last 5 weeks now. So, really sets up as a big Mahomes game.
Yeah, that one was a mirage, clearly not a matchup to worry about for any aspect at all. Tua Tagovailoa is also up in that range. I think he's another 200 cheaper than Justin Fields. I think any of those three guys could be fine for cash if that bit of salary difference really matters, but certainly Mahomes would be my first one. And if you really need salary savings, I think Dak Prescott is fine at 7,400 for a cash lineup. On the tourney side, Tua is projected for half or less of the ownership of Patrick Mahomes or Justin Fields. He's, again, a little bit cheaper than both of those guys. So I think that makes him the most interesting of those three, especially with all the people that you can put around him. Obviously, him and his two wideouts. You can put Amari Cooper in there. You can put a Browns running back in if you want to play it like the Browns jump out to a lead and Miami has to chase the way they did in Detroit a few weeks ago. So that's a fun one to play with. What do you like for tournament quarterback?
Yeah, definitely like Tua. The Dolphins have the second highest implied total on the main slate, 26.25 points. We've already seen Tua go for 24, 29, and 41 FanDuel points out of 6 healthy games. So he's had, 3 tournament winning performances out of 6. Again, I like both sides of the Chiefs Jaguars game. I'm going to be playing Mahomes in tournaments. I'm going to be playing Trevor Lawrence in tournaments, $7,000. Coming off his best PFF passing grade of the season last week, he was actually second in the entire NFL in passing grade. So it wasn't a big fantasy day. Travis Etienne took a couple of the short touchdowns, but Lawrence played really well. Hopefully he can keep that going. The Chiefs pass defense has been beatable. They're 24th in pass defense DVOA. The Chiefs, not surprisingly, have faced the second most pass attempts per game this season. Teams fall behind the Chiefs. They have to throw. You think you're going to get some big volume out of Trevor Lawrence here. And he's running more lately than he was early in the season. Lawrence averaging 24.6 rushing yards per game over the last 5. Again, if you're going to get more dropbacks, because a lot of that rushing is not design stuff. It's, scrambles. So if you're going to get more dropbacks out of Lawrence, that, gives him more chances to take off and run.
For what it's worth, the Chiefs rate a lot higher in pressure rate than they do in sack rate. Now, I don't know if that's just like a bad luck thing for delivering sacks in the game that's going to catch up at some point. It could very well be that. It could also be that they've got enough to get in there and it's not a scary pass rush. So it doesn't surprise me that they're not high in sack rate. So, maybe that generates a little bit more Trevor Lawrence scrambling. I will also throw out Dak Prescott again at 7,400, not because I think he has explosive upside this week, but because I just think that he's a little bit underplayed. 4% projected ownership on here. He's tied for 7th among quarterbacks. Last time out, he hit 26.4 FanDuel points. That's not a tournament winning number, but it's also a number that you could win with. He's behind Derek Carr and Daniel Jones in projected ownership this week. So I think that's just too low, and it's somebody to mix in. I would focus on those more expensive guys that we talked about, mix in some Trevor Lawrence, also mix in some Dak Prescott.
Yeah, plus CeeDee Lamb is a good value, by himself. So I think that, kind of strengthens the case for Prescott because it's a nice value stack.
Mm-hmm. Running back for cash, plenty of options in the high range from 7,700, Dameon Pierce up. What do you like around there?
So I'm looking at a lineup right now that I built that has Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry in it, and I feel pretty good about it. Like, you do have to go cheap at 2 wide receiver spots. You got to play one of the cheap tight ends, which I think I would do anyway. So, Barkley in the best matchup for running backs. We've seen Houston get crushed on the ground for a few weeks in a row now. And then Derrick Henry gets this Broncos defense that is 25th in Football Outsiders run defense DVOA over the last 5 weeks. They're allowing 4.6 yards per carry to running backs over that span. Whether it's Malik Willis or a banged up Ryan Tannehill, like we know, Henry's going to be the focal point of this Titans offense. So I'm leaning towards playing both of those high priced backs in cash right now.
And I'm not worried about the Denver offense getting this game out of hand and taking it away from Derrick Henry. You know that the Titans want to keep Derrick Henry running the offense. So yeah, there's certainly nothing wrong with putting those two guys together in a lineup.
Yeah, I do think Alvin Kamara is a solid play if you want to go down from one of those studs, save $1,000. And then my third back in cash right now is Devin Singletary. He's $5,600. We're assuming Josh Allen does not play right now, and that actually helps Singletary's volume projection. I think you're not going to have the Bills go so pass heavy. You're not going to have Case Keenum stealing carries like Josh Allen does. So probably hurts Singletary's upside if there's no Allen, but I think it makes him a safer cash play based on volume. And $5,600 is a really nice price tag.
Yeah, and I think it might hurt his upside. It might also help it because there's a better chance of him getting those goal line opportunities if Josh Allen's
True.
not in the game. Now, obviously, the question is, do those goal line opportunities show up as much without Josh Allen? Probably not. But when they do, better chance that Singletary gets them. 22 and 16 opportunities in the 2 games before last week. So if you look at last week, disappointing usage on the ground, but he was still the clear leader in playing time. And like you, I would expect more Devin Singletary carries if Case Keenum's in the game. Frankly, if Josh Allen does play, they probably would run the ball a little bit more, at least if they're wise, because they've got Josh Allen with a bad elbow. So that would be a way to take some of the pressure off of him and to force him to not run it, because I don't think there's another way to keep him from running. My question is, like, I think Case Keenum over Josh Allen would also be good for the running back target share overall. I don't know whether we're going to get more Nyheim Hines this week, because certainly the trade tells me that they want Nyheim Hines to be the top receiving back for them. He was barely used last week. Assume more this week. How much more? Tough to know. So maybe we'll start to see Devin Singletary disappear from that area.
Yeah, maybe what you're gonna, I think, would be okay. I mean, at $5,600,
Right.
you're just kind of paying for enough. You can get 12 to 15 carries out of him. Singletary's played 73+% of the Bills' offensive snaps in 5 of the last 6 games. The only exception was that blowout against Pittsburgh, where they kind of rested guys in the fourth quarter. So getting it back, getting that much playing time for $5,600, I just think is a good value.
Yeah, and I agree. I have him down as a cash option as well. We talk about the risk factors, but that's what you're paying for. It's $5,600. You don't get safe lead backs for $5,600. Dameon Pierce is the one guy that we didn't mention a whole lot in that range. 7,700. I think he belongs right up there with the top guys in terms of likelihood of getting carries. Houston clearly wants to ride him as much as it can. The Giants are not a scary matchup for running backs, and it's just not a game script that's likely to get away from them because the Giants are not that good at scoring points. So we should get plenty of Dameon Pierce in that game. I think Dalvin Cook is also okay for cash over here because of his $7,500 salary on FanDuel. I think he's a better bet in this game against the Bills for carries if Josh Allen doesn't play, and because the run defense has been softer in recent weeks. So Dalvin Cook, probably better on a tournament side, but I think that salary, which is short of Dameon Pierce, makes him a cash option as well.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't quite make my top 3 for tournaments, but I love Cook for tournaments. He doesn't make my top 3 for cash. I love him for tournaments. $7,500. I feel like it's actually gone like underreported in fantasy circles. Like nothing goes underreported nowadays. But the fact that Cook has just been dominating this backfield for the past 3 weeks now, even more so than he did under Minnesota's previous coaching staff. Cook has played 87, 76, and then 86% of Minnesota's offensive snaps over the past 3 games, averaging 16.7 carries, 4.3 targets over that span. So, I mean, getting a guy getting that level of work that we know is talented for $7,500, and it looks like he's not going to come in at big ownership, which I agree with, because there are I think, a few better straight up plays. I think Cook's an awesome tournament play.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why we have Jared's usage report on draftsharks.com every Wednesday. Because if you look last week at Washington, disappointing game, 47 rushing yards, 9 receiving yards, just 2 catches. But the targets have been there the past 2 weeks. The carries have been there the past 2 weeks. Jared just mentioned the playing time. So he's on the field a ton. There was a stretch after the shoulder injury where we were wondering whether Alexander Mattison was claiming some of the receiving work. That has clearly not been the case in recent weeks. It's been Dalvin Cook dominating the backfield again. So like what he's getting there. And then Tony Pollard, I mentioned him on the DraftKings show. I certainly think he's in play over here as well. 7K is probably going to keep him from being too highly played. I guess he climbs up quite a bit if Ezekiel Elliott ends up being inactive. So we'll see about his status on Sunday. If Zeke's out, though, I think Tony Pollard enters the cash discussion at 7K against the Packers.
Yes, he definitely would be a cash play if there's no Zeke. I'm doing the Jonathan Taylor thing this week. He's $7,000 on FanDuel. Full practices on Thursday and Friday, and not on the final injury report. I don't think the ankle is gone. I think it's still probably an issue. Maybe he
I hope it's
aggravates it. The ankle injury. There's still a risk there, but $7,000. He's gotten the ball when he's been on the field this season. He's averaging 17.8 carries and 4.2 targets per game. He's actually still been efficient despite, the Colts offense crumbling around him. And he has a good matchup against the Raiders, who are 26th in adjusted points allowed to running backs. We'll see. We don't have an ownership projection on him yet. We'll have one by Sunday. We'll see what it comes in at. I don't think he's going to be super chalky though. So I think he's worth a shot in tourneys.
Yeah, I would be shocked if he reaches chalky level, especially with these other options that we're talking about up there. Plus, now his head coach is a former offensive lineman. That can only be good for a guy's carry share. And Deion Jackson's out for this game, right?
He is, exactly. Yeah, I would expect Jeff Saturday to be a run heavy guy, at least out of the gate.
Yeah. Over to wide receiver for cash. You mentioned CeeDee Lamb being at a good price. I agree. 7,600. I think he's well within play here. The Packers haven't been a terrific matchup for wide receivers, but it's not a negative matchup for CeeDee Lamb because he's not likely to see a whole lot of Jair Alexander. They did lose Eric Stokes likely for the season, one of their corners. So they're down one of their top three at that position. They're down their top pass rusher and Rashawn Gary. They're down their best inside linebacker, Devondre Campbell. So this could be a much different Packers defense than we've gotten most weeks so far. Good price for CeeDee Lamb. He plays in the slot a lot, so there will be plenty of opportunity for him in there. I like him for cash, like him for tournaments as well.
The Packers slot receiver is going to be some guy I've never heard of. Keyshawn Nixon is going to be their slot corner. He's graded horribly by PFF, not surprisingly. So it's a great matchup for Lamb when he's in the slot this week. So I definitely like that call. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown for cash, $6,900. That's a good price tag for a guy seeing this type of volume. You know, he's only been fully healthy for 4 games this season. In those 4 games, 32% of the targets, 35%, 27%, 35%. And that's elite target share. Good matchup here too against the Bears, specifically slot corner Kyler Gordon has allowed the most yards per coverage snap this season. So St. Brown seems like a super safe bet at this price tag for the volume he's likely going to get.
Yeah, just consider him in the mix as long as he stays short of 7K, and probably plenty of weeks where he's in the 7K range as well. Other guys, especially if you want some salary savings, George Pickens, 5,600, Rondale Moore, 5,800, Christian Kirk, 6,800. It's a little bit pricier, and I don't like him as much as Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Darnell Mooney at 6,200, I think, is a solid enough bet for catches, 5+ receptions in 3 of the past 4 games. So we still don't love the Bears passing game, but Mooney's been pretty solid lately.
Yes, yeah, he'd be more of a tournament guy for me. I think the other guys you mentioned, Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, George Pickens, that's who I'm deciding between. You know, again, going back to the running backs, it's like for me, you either play Christian Kirk with Alvin Kamara, or you play Derrick Henry instead of Kamara and have to go down to Rondale Moore or George Pickens. That's kind of the choice you need to make.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure there's a ton of difference between Kirk and Rondale Moore. Maybe better touchdown chances for Kirk, but Rondale Moore is the kind of guy that you look at in the half PPR versus full PPR and you say, he loses some value here, which is obviously true. But if you're going to catch 7 passes and at least get 9 yards per catch, then we're talking about a double digit fantasy day with the chance of finding the end zone.
Yeah, the difference is Rondale Moore's ADOT is 4.6 yards. Christian Kirk is 8.9.
There you go.
So I do think Kirk has more upside as far as that goes.
Yeah, I certainly don't mean they're the same player, but $1,000 difference. There's a whole lot of difference in what you're giving up. On the tourney side, I mentioned CeeDee Lamb in both formats. I like, if you are playing that Dak and CeeDee Lamb, Allen Lazard at 6,700 is kind of a sneaky guy as well. On the other side of that matchup, a negative matchup for wide receiver scoring, but similar to Lamb, we could get Allen Lazard in the slot half the time, and if he does that, he avoids Diggs, Trayvon Diggs. Lost his first name for a second. Trayvon Diggs on the outside for the Cowboys. So that would be a positive matchup for him. And Aaron Rodgers is certainly in a place right now where he's looking for somebody to throw the ball to. So Allen Lazard could be welcome for him. Could be some upside to that stack on a lower owned week for all of those guys.
Yeah, I have Lazard here too. First of all, the guy just scores touchdowns over the past couple of seasons. Now, he had 8 scores in 15 games last year. He has 5 scores in 7 games this year. So at some point, you just kind of got to say this guy's a touchdown scorer. 23% target share last week for Lazard. Romeo Doubs is not going to play on Sunday, so that could push even more volume Lazard's way. So I like that call, like you said, especially with a CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott stack, or just play Lamb and Lazard as a little mini stack. Right. I like Chris Olave too, $7,500. He's coming off 2 straight quiet games now, but he's still seeing insane volume. He saw 9 targets last week. That was a 30% target share. He's averaging 10.5 targets per game in 6 healthy games this season. And the Steelers are 30th in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. And they've especially struggled defending the deep ball. Olave can get deep.
Yeah, from week 2 on, he's seen 28% of the targets. He came out, got 8.8% in the opener and 28% since then. So a very good bet for getting the ball. I think Amari Cooper is available to play on his own, even if you're not playing Dolphins Browns, although it certainly makes sense to get some guys from that. That's another one where even if you're not playing one of the quarterbacks, you can play Cooper and one of the Dolphins guys here. 4% ownership projection on FanDuel for Amari Cooper. He's 14th among wide receivers in expected half PPR points per game. Like, I think he's probably a guy that a lot of people don't really realize just how good a fantasy season he's having. You'll see a big week and then he goes quiet the next week. And I know I forget. Like, I look at the standings, week to week, and I'm like, oh yeah, Amari Cooper's doing really well this season.
Yeah. And our buddy Dwayne McFarland pointed out that Cooper throughout his career has had big splits versus man coverage. He's much better against man coverage than zone coverage. Miami plays the second most man coverage in the NFL, so it looks like a good on paper matchup at least for Cooper this week.
Tight end for cash, Jared. Where are we looking?
Foster Moreau for me. Our guy Greg Dulcich, a little pricier here on FanDuel, just the way I have my cash game lineup set up right now. I need the savings with Foster Moreau at $5,200. He's averaged 6.3 targets this season without Darren Waller. That's 3 games without Waller. And the last 2 games, especially 95 and 88% of the pass routes, those are elite numbers for a tight end. 23% of the Raiders targets in week 8, 14% in week 9. Waller's obviously out. Hunter Renfrow is also out now for at least the next 4 games. That, again, Renfrow is the slot guy. Moreau kind of operates in that area of the field. So, he really should be a pretty good volume bet in this game.
I see your Foster Moreau, and I raise you on the salary savings with Evan Engram at $4,900, which is, it's just disrespectful. Kansas City's 5th most friendly to tight ends by our adjusted fantasy points allowed, 19th in tight end coverage DVOA on Football Outsiders. Engram is off the final injury report for the week, so the back shouldn't be an issue. We never know for sure until Evan Engram gets into the game and gets through the game, but $300 cheaper than Foster Moreau. I like the situation, and I like his chances of getting targets here.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I wrote my notes before we got Jacksonville's final injury report, before we saw Engram was off it. So he's a good play in cash, especially if you need the $300 savings down from Moreau.
And I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about Evan Engram, as I haven't done that enough this year.
You're welcome.
On the tourney side, what are you playing?
Yeah, so Travis Kelce, I think, getting up to him makes sense in tournaments. Don't need to make the argument there. I do think Greg Dulcich is going to be lower owned on FanDuel here because he's, a bit more expensive relatively, but I think he's an excellent play. I think, his usage has been awesome through his first 3 NFL games. Now he's coming off the bye week, so maybe he's even, more integrated into the offense. And Tennessee has not been good against tight ends this season. They're actually 31st in adjusted points allowed to tight ends. And then Dalton Schultz, another Cowboy you could, stack up with Dak Prescott, just $5,500. 23% of Dallas's targets over their previous 2 games with Dak Prescott. Now he's coming off the bye week. Maybe that knee is finally close to 100%. He was actually a full go in practice all week, not on the final injury report. And gets this, banged up Packers defense missing Devondre Campbell. He's a big part of their tight end coverage. So it's a good spot for Schultz, who, should be as healthy as he's been in a while.
Mm-hmm. I think that the Dulcich Derrick Henry stack is a little bit sneaky as well. Taysom Hill is interesting to me this week at $6,500. Not somebody that I want to oversell, but to the degree that he ever makes sense to trust, this could be a week to go ahead and try him. Well, the ownership projection right now is at 1%. So we'll see if that changes. I don't know if maybe that's just where it usually is because he's a tough guy to want to play, but it makes sense because he's coming off a season low in touches. The week before that was a season high in carries for him. We're also coming off a very bad game for Andy Dalton, the kind that makes people ask the Saints if he's still going to be the quarterback. Now we've got TJ Watt coming back. So to me, Jared, this just seems like a situation where game planning this one, I could see them putting some more Taysom Hill in to just counteract all of that, to take a little bit away from Andy Dalton, to add a challenge to TJ Watt coming back. I have absolutely no inside info, and there might not be any more Taysom Hill in this game than in others, but we have typically been getting more Taysom Hill than we did on Monday night. So we should at least get a rebound from that I think we're heading into a situation where it would make sense if we get some extra.
Yeah, I know Dennis Allen was asked about Taysom Hill's lack of touches after that loss to the Ravens. I think he gave kind of a non-answer, of course, but the fact that he was kind of bugged about it, maybe it's I should be getting Taysom Hill the ball more when I don't really have many good weapons on this team. So I like that call. He's expensive. I think he probably will come in around 1% because he is expensive and he hasn't had a big one in a while now. But I mean, he has a 40-point game. Like, no, not even Kelsey can put up a 40-point game. So if you get that out of Taysom Hill, you're in the driver's seat for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, Travis Kelce should be squarely in plans, but otherwise, I don't think anything else is exciting. We talk about some other guys who are options, but none of those guys is like, oh, I got to make sure he's in my lineup. I think that's also what makes me say, all right, let's take a shot and see if it's a Taysom Hill week.
If you're not playing Kelsey or Hill, you're hoping for like 15 points, and you're happy.
Defense, what are you hoping for?
I'd like to get up to the Steelers at 36. I mean, Minnesota's 32. If Case Keenum's under center, I do think they're a viable cash play, but I do like Pittsburgh getting TJ Watt back at home against Andy Dalton. The Saints missing 2 of their starting offensive linemen. It's just a good spot and a cheap price for Pittsburgh.
I like, if Case Keenum's playing, I like the Vikings at 3,200 in a tournament lineup. I like seeing if I can pay up to again, this is hypothetical because I'm not allowed to play on FanDuel right now because they're terrible at customer service. But in the hypothetical land where I'm playing on FanDuel this week, I like paying up for the Raiders at $4,800, who, if they were any lower than that, they would have a much higher ownership projection. If they were 4K or less, they'd be the highest projected defense, I think, on this slate. But it's very low right now in the lineup generator. They're at 4,800. They're facing the Colts. The Colts have been the best matchup for team defenses. Sam Ehlinger is starting once again. The offensive line continues to suck. So there's lots of sack upside in this one. There's lots of turnover upside in this one. And you're going to get lower ownership than you should. So I like the Raiders if you can fit it in a lineup that you like otherwise.
Why are they $4,800 though?
Because they're playing the Colts.
I guess it's not a good defense. I know they have some pass rushers, but they're going to be low owned. I don't know if I could get myself to click them.
Exactly.
I think Arizona is worth considering for tournaments. They're $4,000, decent price. Honestly, whether it's Walford or Stafford under center, I think Arizona is worth a look in tourneys. The Rams have been one of the best matchups for opposing defenses, even with Matt Stafford.
Mm-hmm. I would have liked taking a shot on the Titans this week, but I don't, with all the injuries that they have. Jeffrey Simmons, Bud Dupree, Amani Hooker are all out. Those are the key ones for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
That's going to do it for the Week 10 FanDuel podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now. You can play around in the lineup generator that we've been talking about. Build your own lineups for playing on FanDuel, on DraftKings, on Yahoo. You can also find Kevin's articles highlighting top picks for cash games and tournament lineups on FanDuel this week. For Jared Small and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us.